background is that I am a wetland ecologist, which means that inherently we deal a lot with water. Most of the systems that I work on are salty, so they're on the coast, but they're by definition influenced by both fresh water and ocean water. So we spend a lot of time thinking about water itself, water quality, water legislation, any sort of aspect of water is something that even if I don't want to sometimes with policy, I have to deal with in my research. So the topic of water is huge. What I'm going to try and do today is just give us a little bit of background about each aspect of water. How does it relate historically? What do we know about water today? What are the challenges of working in water, particularly in today's world? And what I can do is there's a lot of facts and figures in here. I'll save this as a PDF, send it to Dr. Tuzian, and he can post it for you guys on Beachboard or however you distribute materials. So you don't feel like you have to copy down every fact and figure that's going to come at you today. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is water in society. And the big point about water in society is that historically, humans have settled near sources of water. Humans can live for a while without food, but they cannot live for a while without water. So all of the civilizations that we look at as being the great civilizations started around some sort of major water source. I'll use examples of the Egyptians, the Mesopotamian civilizations, the Shang dynasty in China, the Romans, and some of the Indus Valley civilizations. Just really showing you what their rise and demise was and how it related to water. Basically, we need water for irrigation. We need water to even grow food, and we need it for transportation. And all three of those are reasons why these civilizations arose around water. I'll just start with the Nile. So until they built the Aswan Dam, which is one of the biggest dams in the world, the Nile, which this is in the late 19th century, was the world's greatest natural river system. It had annual floods that they allowed to flood the entire banks, and they were intensively farmed around the banks of the Nile. So the Nile exists. I mean, obviously, great civilizations have been, formed because they have access to agriculture and transportation, and the Nile is probably the best example. If you look at other civilizations, and I'll come back to this, this is some people call, the Fertile Crescent, the beginning of civilization in Mesopotamia, looking at the Tigris and the Euphrates. So these two big river systems, this is the Euphrates, this is the Tigris River. These converge, forming a very fertile belt in between the two of them. They're primarily located in what is today Iraq, and we'll come back to that. But there is a whole culture of what they call the Marsh Arab community, or the Masan usually, that live, and their entire culture is surrounding these two river systems. If you look at the Shang dynasty, this is the land that was under rule of the Shang dynasty. It is the, I hope, not being a Chinese speaker or writer, that I hold the right character, but I believe the written character for politics is the same as flood control in Chinese. Did I get the wrong character?
No, you're good.
Okay, phew. It's a little hard to ground truth that.
Oh, absolutely.
But I do know that this part is true, that, the translation of that, you control the government if you control the access to the water. And so the fact that the character is the same, and you see these major dynasties, developing around river systems, when they excavate Shang dynasty sites, you frequently see indications of just how much they use those water systems. There's pumps, there's cisterns, and they're all contained in the rulers' homes. They're not in everyone's homes. They're in places that the people who were in control lived. If you continue, this is a picture of the Roman baths. So this is indicating not only how important it was to this starting of the civilization, but as civilizations built, this became a symbol of social importance. And the art and the social importance of it was so great that this was how city life was determined. You had access to a bath, and that was the mansion that you could buy. That was the home that everyone wanted. Or the proximity to the baths indicated your social importance in Roman society. They also, the Romans, they had one of the first wastewater treatment systems. They were separating freshwater baths from wastewater. They had what they called the cloaca maxima, which sort of, was a strange name, but that basically took everything that was sewage out of the city separately. So they were already recognizing how important that was. And they estimate that the amount of water that they were distributing in ancient Rome per day was 1 million cubic meters per day. That's a lot of water that they were distributing to people. Now, this is where you see all the famous aqueducts. They were built around the 315 BC, the Roman aqueducts. And they really were how they converted anyone they conquered and put into the Roman Empire. They controlled their water system, they built aqueducts, and they determined whether they got water or not. If you were a rebellious portion of the Roman Empire, you didn't get any water. That was very much how they centralized control. Now, in all of these situations, and the Indus Valley was the last one I showed.
You might want to mention, this one is in England.
Is that?
The bath. That's in England.
This particular bath?
The bath that you showed, right?
No, this is one of the ancient ones in Rome.
It is in Rome?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's just one like this in England.
Yeah.
You see the bath. It's
Actually,
exactly like that.
It was funny, I almost put in that one as well, because this system was copied in, I think they had 7 countries. You can find almost the exact same shot because they copied that Roman design.
Oh, okay.
But this one happens to be, I took this one, so I do know that it's...
Because when I looked at it, I thought, no, I've seen this here. I've been there.
Yeah. No, there's a very similar one that I don't have a picture of, but this one, I'm sure it was Roman.
Oh, okay.
And so the last one I had was the Indus Valley civilization, another great one. This flourished around rivers and deltas. So deltas are that spread of water-influenced areas that are around the rivers. And this remains in India a symbol of culture, to be around water. So the river remains sacred in a lot of Indian culture. And there's 7 rivers that they consider important in India: the Ganges, Yuma, Godavari, again my pronunciation is probably awful, the Saraswati, which is actually an underground river, the Sindhu, and the Kaveri. And they cover the length of all of India, and that's where you see civilizations first having arose. But what all of these share is that not only was the rise of that civilization accompanied by water, but often the demise of each one of those civilizations was caused by what they did with water. Have any of you guys read this book? It gets a little long in the beginning. In the middle, he reemphasizes this point over and over again. But the idea is that one of the major factors that determined the fate of human society was what they did with water. The Indus River Valley some of the civilizations along there were wiped out by floods. A lot of the Nile Egyptian civilizations were wiped out by droughts. All of those were major environmental changes to how water is allocated. Some of the Roman civilizations, there's lots of different reasons why Rome fell. Some of them are based on the fact that the aqueduct system could be divided. And when someone attacked an outlying settlement, they could divide the water system that existed within Rome. So all of the rise and fall of these civilizations have to do with water. So that's my big compelling argument in the beginning, that countries like Iran and America were initially able to flourish because they have access to water that leads them to agriculture, transportation, etc. Where you see places like Australia, other nations that maybe they didn't have great early civilizations because they were more of a desert, places like that. And not all of what we know about, not all of what has happened to great civilizations has to do with what I'll call environmental factors, like naturally occurring droughts and floods. Some of what we've done to our water systems have been environmental, anthropogenically mediated environmental disasters. Does anyone know where this is?
I just learned it in another class.
I was just about to say, a lot of people lecture about this. So this is the Aral Sea. Is that what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is now between what's now Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, which when the original photos were taken, those countries didn't exist. The management challenge is still the same. So this used to be formerly one of the 4 largest lakes, meaning it's fresh water, in the world. It has about 68,000 square kilometers was the total area then.